All right, I think we can get started here. Thanks everybody for taking the time to join us today. We've got a really great group of farmers and ranchers here who are happy to share some of their knowledge with you. A little bit about me. I am Andrew Tonys. I work at Center for Rural Affairs and coordinate the Conservation Mentorship peer-to-peer learning network. And all four of the featured speakers here today are part of that network. A little bit about the Center for Rural Affairs. It is a rural nonprofit based in Lyons, Nebraska, Northeast Nebraska. They do a lot of different community development type work in rural spaces across the state. And we also have office in Iowa, Minnesota, and South Dakota, where we engage in rural issues that affect small businesses, farmers, every aspect of small town rural life. And with that, I think I'll let our mentors introduce themselves. Just tell us a little bit um, about your operation, and we'll get into specifics here in a little bit. We'll start with Homer. You're first on my screen.
Land steward, rancher from north central part of the state, south of Bassett. Uh, Fourth generation on our ranch. My wife Darla and I are operating along with my son Chad and his wife Tricia. We primarily grass. We're native grasses here in the Sand Hills. We do have one pivot that we have perennial grasses. So we don't have like some of you that have corn and various crops. We're just focused in on our grasses and how to manage forage. We do harvest all those forages with cattle. We've for years and years we're a cow-calf ranching operation. We in recent years have switched overall to backgrounding and stalkers, and that's something where my son Chad wanted to go, and for generation transfer, that's what we now do. I think if our ranch has been known for anything through the years, it's the information system that we use to manage with. And I'll just let some of that come out as we get questions. So,
Awesome. Thank you, Homer. And as I remember it, let me just say, everybody who is in attendance, this is set up as a meeting. So if you have any questions at any time, just raise your hand, or you're free to ask a question of any of our mentors. I'm hoping that we can just have a good dialogue here and an opportunity to learn from these folks. Let's go with Ron. You're up next. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your operation.
First of all, Andrew, thanks for the opportunity to participate in this webinar. Ron Bolz. My wife, Becky, and I started breeding on a herd of registered Angus cattle about 48 years ago. Now, in reality, they're commercial cows with papers because we treat them like commercial cows. But we're located in the Chadron and the Crawford areas. We're somewhat unique in that we don't own a ranch. We try to keep our head above water on leased grass. And we're also different from mainstream seed stock production in that we're focused on lower input maternal function. Focused on the mother cow, not focused on feed yard or growth or carcass or milk. Good Lord has blessed us with 6 children, the youngest of which, a young lady by the name of Sadie, has taken over management of the cow herd about 8 years ago. She runs the cows, like I said, on lease grass. Most of that is Nebraska Game and Parks wildlife management area called the Ponderosa south of Crawford, and we can talk more about that later, but that's basically what we do.
Excellent. Thank you, Ron. Let's go with Dan. You're up next.
Sure. Thank you. Dan Stelling. I'm from Pierce, Nebraska. Going to be probably quite a little bit different than some of the other fellows here because we are actually more in farming country. We do run a herd of commercial red Angus cows. And by we, I mean my 2 sons, Matt and Mike, and myself. They're involved with the cattle with me, plus they each have farm ground as well. Uh, we're big into cover crops, no-till. My oldest son is into organic production. Uh, as far as the grassland goes, we don't own any of the grass that we graze. We actually have, at the present time, 8 different pastures in 4 different counties with 7 different landlords. So it's quite a bit different than the Sandhills where everything is all together in one nice ranch. But then, maybe they have to send their cows out for the wintertime. Well, ours is kind of backwards of that because we've got 20 some quarters of ours plus the neighbors that we can rent that's all within 2 miles of home for the winter grazing. So they're all close by while we're grazing corn stalks and cover crops and that for the winter time and through calving. So we're going to have a good diverse group today, I think.
Thank you, Dan. I agree. Chris.
Hi, my name's Chris Trumler. I'm from Rockville, Nebraska. It's about 50 miles north of Kearney. I graduated from UNL in 1994 with a degree in animal science. I returned to the ranch. I'm a first generation rancher. Both my parents were teachers, and my dad began to buy land in the 70s, and he ran cows as a hobby. Currently, I run about 115 June calving cows, and then I run their calves as yearling stockers the following summer. I also buy some calves to run as yearlings. I raise corn, soybeans, milo, alfalfa on both irrigated and non-irrigated. Everything we farm is used no-till. We use gravity irrigation, pivot irrigation, and subsurface drip irrigation. But the majority of the land that we own and lease is native rangeland. And we have one small pivot of 50 acres that is an irrigated pasture.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris.
Yep.
So I think our guests might notice that we have 4 producers from 4 geographically different regions of the state doing things in different ways. And that's on purpose because Nebraska is a big state with a lot of geographic and biological diversity. And it's important I feel like it's important for us to recognize those differences from one place of the state to the next and how everybody is kind of tackling that as take advantage of it, but it's also a challenge in some ways. So with that, I will stick with you, Chris. Can you talk a little bit about why you felt it was important to include conservation as a factor in your decision-making processes?
Okay. I forgot to mention my son's sitting right next door. He just came home and returned to the ranch, so I do have help. So
that's
and
great.
My dad's fully retired. So I'm an avid outdoorsman. I love hunting and fishing. So and I just love seeing wildlife and Mother Nature. I do this more as a labor of love than for dollars and cents. I mean, to hunt, but the older I get, the less I hunt, and the more I just enjoy stuff. As a cattle rancher, I like seeing how my decisions affect the wildlife and the cattle and how closely these two are intertwined. And like they say, what's good for the herd is good for what's good for the birds is good for the herd. Protecting our grasslands is extremely important. There's increased pressures of invasive species, cedar trees, musk thistles, Canadian thistles, and in our area we had an increase of conversion of rangeland to crop ground, and it just amazes me with the low commodity prices how people continue to do this.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Dan, you want to take a stab at that? Why you felt it was important to include conservation as a factor?
Okay. Well, probably most of the conservation efforts that we've made would be in the farmland, and where we're located is extremely sandy. So the no-till, cover crops, all those steps were done in an effort to control wind erosion to try and build soil organic matter and just to make the place more productive. So the reason I do it, I just feel like we're stewards of God's creation here, and that it's really rewarding to see things get better over time. And that goes with like breeding the cattle, the way we want our mother cows to look and perform, to the farmland, the grassland, everything. We a lot of times feel like we're pretty smart. We can take all these soil samples and think we've got a lot of things figured out. But I think our creator actually made this planet a lot more complex than we even realized. So I think the more we can just cooperate in harmony with that design, the better off we all are.
Really appreciate that sentiment. Thank you. Homer.
I think if you go back to the generations of Shovel Dot Ranch, each generation has had a love of the land and everything that's there, the entire community that resides out there. And I think so they pass that love on to every generation to follow. Myself, when I graduated from the University of Nebraska in 1971, came back to the ranch and saw what my dad was doing, which was good. But I think various technologies have come out in different ways to manage that whole ecosystem out there. And I tell people I used to, when I on the ranch, I had a tendency to look out, and I looked out at the cattle. And over time, I really learned to look down more and look and see what was on the land and the plants and the animals and everything that was there, and to manage that probably more closely than we even did our cattle, which I think were both important. I got involved in a group called the Sandhill Task Force probably 20 years ago, which was a conservation group that was really just, focused in on the sandhills and what was happening there and how to make it that whole thing more profitable for ranch, but the people that live there, but to make it, our whole ecosystem better. Our family won the Leopold Award in 2012, and then eventually a few years later, I got on the Sandhill Task Force, the Sand County Foundation Board, which gives that award. So a whole lot of things have affected the way I look at the land and managing the land and my love for the land. And so that really got us started even more and more doing things from a conservation standpoint. And the only thing I'll add is I think we're fortunate here where our ranch and that we're just managing grass. There isn't anything that we do, I think, from a conservation standpoint, it isn't good for us from an economic standpoint as well. So we're lucky that way.
Excellent. Thanks, Homer. Ron, can you tell us why you felt it was important to include conservation as a factor in your operation?
I guess to give credit where it's really due, I've been influenced by conservation-minded people for a long time. I grew up on a family-oriented 60-cow Holstein dairy farm in south central Pennsylvania. And my maternal grandfather, I'm proud to state that he was the first farm in Pennsylvania to actually have the Soil Conservation Service at that time lay out contour strips. And that was in like the early 50s. And then my father was the first one to buy a no-till corn planter in the county. And of course, all of his neighbors thought he was crazy. So I come to conservation through family influence. I had an opportunity to provide coordination to the Nebraska Grazing Lands Coalition for about 12 years and got to meet with some of the truly elite grass managers across the state of Nebraska. And I also taught the range livestock production courses at Chadron State College in a range management program for about 10 years. And long and short of it, I was the cow guy at Chadron State, but with a range focus. Uh, Teaching at Chadron State, taught about 11 different courses, but 4 or 5 of those were heavy, uh, directed towards regenerative agriculture. And, from a grazing management perspective, we spent a lot of time talking about holistic plant grazing management principles of high stock densities, short durations, and long recoveries, and the impact that has long term on soil health principles, water infiltration, water holding capacity, wildlife benefits, and the list goes on and on. So, but I've learned from some tremendous mentors across Nebraska.
Thank you, Ron. Yeah, just a reminder to everybody, if you have a question at any point, feel free to just raise your hand and we'll make sure you get an opportunity to ask it. Ron, we'll stay with you for this. How does the landscape and the local climate impact your grazing management?
Well, of course, as you all know, this far west in Nebraska, we're semi-arid. In more recent years, I'm thinking maybe arid. But our biggest environmental challenge, of course, would be lack of moisture. Historically, we'd be in that 13 to 17-inch rainfall area. March, April, May, and June are our big water months, and we hope that actually transpires because we're in the midst of winter in drought conditions again. But as I stated earlier, we don't own a ranch. I think we had cattle at 6 different locations last summer, none of them contiguous. I mentioned that my daughter does run about 150 pairs on Nebraska Game and Parks wildlife management area called the Ponderosa south of Crawford. That's 2,700 contiguous acres. Some of it's fairly steep terrain, but a 2012 wildfire took out all the permanent fencing, and Game and Parks never put those fences back. So it went ungrazed for 7 years from 2012 to 2019 when she started grazing those acres. She builds solar-powered polywire paddocks with step-in posts and moves those cows about twice a week. And she also has to haul water. So she's applying holistic planned grazing management principles to those acres for about 5 months of the year. And the other 7 months, then she has other deeded acres leased from other landowners where she applies those same principles. We also operate with minimal equipment, which in fact we don't have a calving barn or even a really good windbreak. So we calve in late April, May, calve with Mother Nature, own minimal equipment, buy all of our feedstuffs that we feed, what little hay we feed. We winter graze with second or third cutting alfalfa as protein. But the fact that we don't own a ranch and heretofore have not managed to get any long-term leases has prevented us from building permanent subdivision. We rely heavily on permanent or temporary fencing. I think that addresses, I think, what you were looking for, Andrew.
Sure does. Thank you. Dan, your turn. How does the local landscape and climate impact your grazing management?
Okay, well, I would say that the landlords actually they actually control the grazing management more than anything. Some pastures we're able to do a fairly intense rotation on, and some not, just because that's the way they want it done. So, but as far as the climate goes, we have some really sandy upland pasture. We have bottom pasture. Some years, one works a lot better than the other. So we just need to manage according to what Mother Nature deals us that particular year. Uh, in our rotations, we try not to start in the same paddocks every year. We like to mix it up so we don't change the grass species to an undesirable mix in any one paddock. Um,
What would you end up with, Ron, if you graze the same paddock every year at the same time?
Was your question addressed to Dan, Andrew?
Yes. Sorry.
oh, yeah, if you started in the same paddock every year, well, yeah, you would probably decimate the cool season species in that pasture if that's the same one you started in every year. And uh, yeah, it just works better to mix it up. In fact, we leave paddocks once in a while, just completely let them have a year off. I think that's good for them once in a while too. We try to follow the 6 principles of soil health as laid out by the understanding ag people, amongst others. Um, and it used to be 5, but the 6th one that they've added recently, of course, is context. And context changes year by year, location by location. So yeah, it's kind of a loaded question actually, because uh, yeah, there's a lot of moving parts to it. I always say uh, grazing is like doing a dance with Mother Nature, but she's the one that leads.
Thank you, Dan. Chris.
Our native range on our ranch includes everything from sandy Valentine soils to heavy clay soils to wet riparian pastures. So we take all these different soil types and pastures into consideration to make our stocking rates. And I always try and use rainfall as a limiting factor for the stocking rates. So we're always planning on being in a drought, because if we're not, then everything's great. Um, the better the diversity in some of these pastures are of grasses, forbs, and sedges, the better it is for the wildlife and the cattle. I always take into account what kind of species of plants are in our pastures. I took range management in UNL, and so we spent a week at Halsey, and that was one of the best classes I ever took at Lincoln. And we had to identify over 100 species of grass, and we had to um, figure out stocking rates and carrying capacity, and they kind of taught me that you break your plants into 3 different types. You got your increasers, decreasers, and invaders. Your increasers are plants that go up with increased grazing pressure, so the cattle are not seeking them out. Your decreasers are the plants that cattle seek out, so the harder you graze, the less vigor they have, and then your invaders are plants that come in like ragweed, musk thistle, and those. And we also manage our pastures according to cool season, warm season grasses, and the grazing rotations take all these into consideration.
So a lot of decisions to make there. Let's see. I kind of lost track of where I was. Is it Homer?
Yeah. I think a lot of people think when they talk about the sand hills in the our landscape that it doesn't vary that much. And I think that's so wrong. And even on our ranch, the production ability might go from zero point 0.4 AUMs per acre clear up to maybe 3 AUMs per acre. So when you look at the different landscape and we have, and you talk about the climate too, I mean, we may get uh, an inch of, and you can have that happen on any farm or ranch. You might get an inch of rain here and 2 inches here, and then maybe a quarter of an inch in another spot. So all that has to be taken into account as we manage the grasses and the forages that are there. And I might touch upon just very briefly. We started using a program called the Grazing Manager clear back in the 90s. And we'd worked with the NRCS a lot, and we went to a lot of, we started going to rotational systems of grazing clear back in the 80s. And we'd been to, various grazing schools, but we decided we really wanted to have some type of a program or whatever that we could measure what effects we were having on the land. And we looked at a lot of different ones, started using the grazing manager, but it gave us the ability. We had to, all our various pastures, we had to put in acreage and production ability. Then throughout the summer, we moved, the program, you put the cattle that were in, and then you could manage it that way. But I'm a very big believer in, whatever it be, how, that you measure something beyond. And there's people out there, and I'm sure a lot of people on the today that can look at it and know the effects they're having on the land and the plants and the animals. But I think if you can have a measurement, whether it's soil measurement, whether it's the plants that are there, or whether it's something like the grazing manager, to really tell how you're affecting a land, I think that's really important.
Great. Thank you, Homer. We have a question in the comment for Chris from Ron Seelock. You stated that you buy some calves to add to your own for summer grazing. Have you found that you have to step up your preventative health programs as opposed to just grazing your own cattle?
Uh, we usually buy them about this time of year. So this is when you get them in, that's the main time you have to worry about health concerns. Once we can get them healthy, eating out of the bunk, and they take them to grass, I can't tell the difference between our cattle and their cattle health causes. The main thing, the problem we have with running yearlings is pink eye, and I've tried everything. Last year wasn't as bad, but pink eye is our number one health problem by far.
Huh. That's interesting. Is that due to wet springs or,
They get so if you have too high a grass, too much residue left over, pokes them in the eye. Starts their eye running, face flies, start landing, spread pink eye. We've tried vaccines, we've tried CTC and the mineral, we spray them. I mean, just anything to get rid of them, and it's some years are bad and other years aren't so bad.
oh, that's interesting. Thank you. And thanks for that question, Ron. I do want to ask a question of all of you before we get into like the specific practices. Have there been any state, federal, or local cost share programs that you've taken advantage of that you found to be helpful in your goals? I'll start with Dan.
Uh, yes, I helped with one of the landlords, helped him coordinate uh, cost share for cross fencing and water development in his pasture. Um, and we've also done a fair amount of cost share with cover crops. So those would be the two main ones.
Okay, good. Chris, what about you?
I started a lot of these practices through the Conservation Stewardship Program with the NRCS, and I looked at it as a way to make some extra money. And I went through the whole list that they had to do, and I've continued all those to this date. We get EQIP funding from the NRCS. We get cost share from the NRCS. From the NRDs, I got a cost share to put a pipeline and a rubber tank in. We put solar wells in from both of those, but the funding was pretty tight last year, so we really had to beg and plead to get that. Um, and we get cost shares. I've got a cost share from Ducks Unlimited, Pheasants Forever, Nebraska Game Parks, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife to do some wetland restoration projects. So,
Were you able to graze a wetland restoration? Is that part of the management
uh,
plan?
we don't. It's so swampy. Uh, they are concerned about spring migration for the birds to have a safe place where they can put on fat reserves. They really don't care if we, they want to. We have to go in there and spray whatever comes up. Cedar trees, willows, Russian olives. So we want to keep it a grassland instead of having it turn back to that kind of swampy reed canary, um, willows, that kind of.
Yeah, that woody encroachment.
Yes.
And, all right, thanks, Chris. Homer, what about you as far as any cost share programs that have been helped out?
We've done a lot of them through the years. Started, I think it would have been the 80s with the Great Plains program that we did through the NRCS. We've worked with the Sandhill Task Force for cedar tree removal, NRDs, and a lot of things developed around fencing, water development, and woody encroachment. But all those different organizations have helped us with that through cost share.
Good, thanks, Homer. What about you, Ron?
I've highly encouraged the private landowners that we lease from to pursue every opportunity they can for water development and fencing cost share through NRCS, some of which have been fairly aggressive.
Yeah, I know you're in a different situation, not having any of the land in your own name, so that makes it quite a bit more difficult to implement those. So thank you. And just a reminder to everybody, anybody that came in here late, feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions. Don't worry about interrupting me. Oh, we got one in the chat here for Dan or anyone who wants to answer. This is from Ron Seelock again. With corn and soybean projections at or below break even, what would be your approach to encouraging a cash grain farmer to try allowing you to rent a piece of his ground to grow a cover crop and graze it during the growing season?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because landlords are often the wild card that keeps us from really doing what we know should be done. But yeah, I have been able to do that successfully, just building a relationship with the landlord, and over a period of time they see what we're doing and they kind of trust us to do what we think is best because they kind of know what motivates us. So but as far as putting irrigated cropland into a year of full cover crop is something we've done for several years now. And it has made the neighbors, hit the brakes and gawk over the fence, wondering what in the world we're up to when they see this cocktail mix of cover crops, including forage sorghum and millet and sunflowers and buckwheat and all those good things. So it's kind of entertaining. Uh, and we have been able to work it into our rotation. So we would go corn, soybeans, and then a full year of cover crop. And of course, following the soybeans, we put in cereal rye in the fall after harvest, which we will graze the following spring. And then we put in the multi-species cover crop, and then we will either chop or graze that. And then as soon as we take that off, the sorghum sudan and the millet will regrow, of course. But we seed into that, no-till into that, cereal rye, turnips, collards, radishes, and that grows kind of in the understory of that sorghum sudan and millet. So by freeze out in the fall, we've got winter grazing that's shoulder high again. So we get a good winter graze on that. Uh, and then the following spring, of course, the rye is there. So we can stack up quite a few things and we can be competitive with a cash grain crop, which now doesn't take much of anything.
Yeah, that sounds like a really, really great system. How do you account for like your nitrogen I don't know if you call it a bonus from grazing stocks that, you're going to plant that field and, in with your nutrient management plan at that point, like how do you account for how much manure is on that field?
Um, well, I don't think there's actually, if you're just grazing corn stalks, there's probably no net gain from the manure because, the cattle put back what they've always said about 80% of what they consume, they put back on the ground. So a lot of that depends on the distribution of the manure and that. But I think what they benefit the land more so from the microbes and the biological activity, more so than the actual nitrogen. So anytime we can get livestock on the land, it's a good thing. Uh, and where this gentleman's asking the question about grazing it in the summertime, that would actually be better than the way we've been doing it. We don't need the summer grazing. We need it in the wintertime more so. But that's something that we're looking at. We may incorporate that if we can figure out the fencing and the water and all that. So yeah, I'm really encouraged to hear people thinking along those lines.
Great, thanks, Dan. Anybody else have any thoughts to add to that?
Dan, your sequence of grazable cover crops that you shared with us, you've got that grazing route year round.
Yes.
Sorry,
Well,
you've got
that's our intent on all of our farmable acres is there's a living root year round.
yeah.
In fact, it has to, in order for us to qualify for the Regenified program, which we do sell some non-GMO corn under the Regenified label. So we get a fairly nice bonus for that.
All right, we got another question in the chat. This is just to anyone who wants to answer. From Trista, we purchased 16 acres near Diller that was previously planted in brome. We are currently running a mixed breed herd of 13 head. I want to diversify our grass coverage, improve our soil health, and obviously increase yield. We are dry land and surrounded by corn and soybeans. Where can I start, or who do I start with to get advice on ways to improve our land health? I have thought about the Extension Service in Jefferson County. Like all of you, our funds are limited, and so is our time. My husband and I both have town jobs.
I mean, I would,
Thank you.
besides
Go ahead.
extension, suggest that they use the NRCS because they've really been helpful for us through the years, and they might even help you want to increase your soil health, but they might help you with different ways to measure how you're affecting the soil health and that type of thing. So I would suggest NRCS besides extension.
Yeah, thank you, Homer. And I would, if you are interested in reaching out to NRCS, if you are having trouble reaching out to them, you can email me or give me a call. I'll drop my information in the chat there, and I'll be glad to help connect you. Sorry, I interrupted somebody. Ron, you go ahead.
Andrew, did this individual say she's close to Diller, Nebraska?
Correct, in Jefferson County.
Off the top of my head, I'd have to think about it, but I tried to find a local mentor that's been down this road for numerous years and seek their expertise and avoid making some mistakes that perhaps that person's already made.
Andrew,
good advice. Yes.
I've got a question. I read a lot of literature, Jim Garish, Boyson out of France, Alan Savory, Alan Nation. And one of the things with regard to drought periods where we're seeing forage reduction, it's always been suggested that, rather than speeding up, you need to slow down so you get more rest period in that grazing cycle. To me, that requires destocking. And in some cases, I'm not sure if that was included in some of the discussion that I've been reading. But in some cases, that's difficult to do if you've got a group of yearlings provided by somebody or even stockhouse. I'm custom grazing, primarily. So, can somebody comment on that? If we slow down, then we're going to graze a greater percentage of the forage in order to allow for a greater rest period.
I've found that running yearlings gives you a lot more flexibility. You can turn them out in June, and then you can take them off and sell them right away. You don't have to keep them out there till October. With cow calf, we usually turn out the first week of May and we take out the last week of October. So I really like the flexibility of yearlings to letting your pasture rest and stocking a little bit lighter.
My only comment, Gordon, I think it was Gordon that asked that question. And we had went to Alan Savory and some of his schools, and I know we slowed down, but you are grazing more of the forage that's there, and you're going to have less leaf left and that type of thing. So, and I think you said you were taking in cattle, so that really affects what you do too. But you still, hopefully you have agreements with those people that you're taking in the yearlings for that you can do, like Chris mentioned, destock. But I think slowing down does help, but you really have to monitor the amount of rain you do get and how that affects, what's happening there. But I do think slowing down and giving more rest ahead of us helped us at times. But like I say, you really have to monitor how you're affecting, what plant surface you have left there, and then what rain you might be receiving moving forward. And it might come to the fact that you do have to destock and help. Hopefully you have something worked out with those people that you're taking cattle in for.
Yeah, good question.
Well, I have another question, Andrew. I think Chris mentioned the whole issue of pink eye and the head scratching the eyes and so forth. We had a situation this year where it was very dry in April, and generally what we do is do a fast graze May 1 to May 15th. And I should mention that we have a mixed species here, cool season wheatgrass, 2 varieties, and then warm season, and alfalfa is a legume and some other legumes. In April of last year, it was very dry, but the forage was there. It's greening up, and as it got dry, we had started our fast graze to avoid heading out as we did in the previous year, which was successful. But in this year, about the time we were finished with the fast graze, the grass was starting to, leaves were turning yellow as if it was going into dormancy. And then all of a sudden it started raining the end of May and wouldn't quit. And it headed out. Unbelievable. And what I was wondering about is if the plant was resetting its clock, so to speak, moving in from a dormancy period later, and we were way behind. Any thoughts on that? We went out and clipped a lot of that because we were getting pink eye, trying to prevent that from scratching eyes. But anyway.
Any comments on Dennis's statement there?
Every year is different, so you just kind of go with the flow. But I've tried vaccines, I've tried CTC, but grazing management's by far the best preventative. I personally, I would like to prescribe burn the pasture, get rid of all your residue out there, and then you have a huge flush of green grass with no stems sticking up. But it's hard to do that.
Is there a prescribed burn association in your area, Chris?
There is.
Yeah,
I'm not a member because I feel if I get 10 guys show up to my place, I got to help those 10 guys. I'm by myself. I didn't have the time. I will help out if somebody asks. So that's kind of where that's at.
Yeah, totally understand. Let's see, Ron Seelock had a comment here for Dennis. Homer's comment reminded me of the value of frequent growing season forage inventories so that you know what grass you have in front of you. So yeah, thank you for that, Ron. I do want to point out, I did drop a link in the chat. It's at the top of the chat to the Conservation Mentorship Network website, which is hosted for us by the Nebraska Department of Water, Environment, and Energy. They've been a great partner in our work there with the website. So just wanted to highlight that there for you. It's a great resource to get to know. Well, we have 5 of our mentors on the call now with Dennis Demmel here too. So we've got quite a few more spread all across the state of Nebraska, doing farming and ranching in ways that work for them where they're at. I do want to touch on a few, like just management techniques or topics, I guess. I'd like to bring up minimizing erosion. I always think of this, especially Homer, I'm going to single you out in the sandhills there, highly erodible sandhills. So how do you manage for that with your cattle so that you're not creating blowouts?
I think primarily through rotational grazing and short duration grazing. And when I'm talking about short, I mean, I'm not talking about where some people may, be really intensive, but in our situation, we may graze a pasture, for example, during a year, we may graze it for 4 or 5 days early, and then we'll graze it for maybe a week and a half later on in the summer. And then we try to always leave grass in all our pastures in winter graze as well. So I think just to primarily rotational grazing and just managing, that we're always leaving something there and then giving it time to rest. So those blowouts and those areas that are a little sandier have a chance to recover more. So that would be our primary technique. Like I say, we do, maybe we'll graze something twice in the summer, but always graze most everything at once in the winter too.
Okay, great. Ron, I'm thinking of you too there by Chadron. You got some pretty interesting terrain in that part of the state that you're running cattle on. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, when we think of native range, particularly well-managed native range, typically we don't think about erosion, but I will share this late April, a year ago, 2025. We come out of winter extremely dry, and in fact, we sold the bottom third of our cows there about mid-April because we didn't know that we were going to have a blade of grass to graze. But it did start raining, but some of those rains came torrential. In fact, we had a 4-inch rainfall event, which is virtually unknown in this part of the world. But even on well-managed native range that had significant soil litter cover, we had some real erosion that actually moved that soil litter downhill, if you will. So, I mean, it's not totally inescapable, but even well-managed range in significant rain events is probably going to experience some erosion.
Yeah, certainly. Chris, you have anything to add to that?
We use no-till. Some of our fields, they're not highly erodible ground, but they've got some hills on them. Grass waterway strips at the bottom, so you don't have the washouts. All the ponds and stream banks I fence off and put electric fence around them. It improves the water quality of the pond. We don't have bank erosion, and it makes for better wildlife habitat, to tell the truth. We've started using strip tillage, and we're probably going to start doing more of that. We noticed a huge bump in our yields with that, and we plant cover crops on mainly soybean fields or what we chop for silage. Those fields we plant to cover crops of turnips, radishes, rye, triticale. We don't plant them on their corn acres because usually it's too late, and it's just a bad time of year in November to be planting stuff.
Yeah, thank you. It certainly is a challenge to get something planted into a cornfield. I have seen one of the mentors, Vance McCoy, out there by Elsie, has been doing some planting this late fall, early winter in southwest Nebraska, and getting enough rain to like see something come up. It was until recently, it was not really that cold, so it was interesting to see those results he was getting there. But yeah, definitely a challenge. Dan, do you have anything to add to?
Oh, yeah, on the farmable acres, yeah, it's certainly cover crops. Um, and just watching our rotations so we're not devoid of carbon. You know, if we have too many crops in a row that leave little residue, such as soybeans, you know, we have to be a little more diligent with our cover crops. And that's why we only usually do soybeans once every 3 or 4 years. So we want to keep plenty of residue out there. And then we do put cover crops on everything. And yeah, it is a challenge in the corn. And sometimes it doesn't get done till November, but rye is really some amazing stuff because even if you don't ever see it in the fall and winter, you'll be amazed how much will actually come up in the spring. So as they say, as long as there's a few 40-degree days, the stuff will germinate and be viable. So we put it out there one way or another usually. As far as grazing the pasture land goes, I would say we need to try and watch where we put cross fences. And that's one of the downfalls of permanent cross fences. If you're going down a hill or in the wrong spot in a fragile area, there could be some trailing or some traffic in areas where you probably shouldn't have it. So that's where polywire is kind of nice. So you can change it up from time to time. But that's not always practical either. So we just try and be aware of where our cross fences are and how we manage them.
Excellent. Thank you, Dan.
This Homer mentioned one, and I thought of it from what Dan just said. When we first started cross fencing and you know, for our to better manage our grasses and more rotational, we went across a lot of the water tanks we already had, so we could water in two different areas, and it saved us the cost of putting in more tanks. But we did get a lot of, you know, cattle coming down those fence lines and whatnot, and it just really didn't work well because of all that trailing. So we have went to, you know, and we worked with the NRCS and some of the cost share programs. So we've got water in the middle of every pasture, so we to help minimize some of that trailing that, like Dan mentioned. So
Yeah, thanks, Homer.
Andrew, before we leave the erosion topic, you know, when most people think about erosion, they think about water erosion. But I think we're seeing a significant amount of wind erosion here in the last month or so, especially in this part of the world. Well, not just this part. My wife and I had an opportunity to drive to Omaha and back last week and through central Nebraska, and I was just astounded by the amount of dirt that was blowing off of cornstalk fields that looked like they had been no-tilled this past spring. So wind erosion is of great concern also.
Absolutely. I've seen it around here. We had those really high wind days just a couple days ago, and I could see a lot of dirt blowing around. We are at the end of our scheduled hour. You're all welcome to stick around. I'll stick around. This is a really great discussion. I don't want to end it prematurely. I do want to point out in the chat, there is a link there to a Google form. That is an event valuation. Please take the time to look it over and fill it out for us. And yeah, we just appreciate all of you being here. I also put my email address down there, so if you have any follow-up questions with me, you are welcome to get in touch with me. So with that said, what do you guys want to talk about next? I've got this list of things here, but like this is a good organic conversation, and like you guys can just take it where you want it to go.
I'd tell people to get to know your NRCS uh, person for your county and have a good working relationship because they will help you a ton. I mean, I've got my person's cell phone number. She even gave to me because we talk all the time about stuff, and she's constantly keeping me up to date on any new programs and cost shares. And it's huge. I mean, that's to me the biggest benefit is keeping up to date on stuff and finding out what's going on.
Yeah, they are a great resource. Thanks for pointing that out, Chris.
You know, Ron mentioned it earlier, but local mentors, and I think of all the people around the state, and especially in the Sand Hills and Arcade, but throughout the state and even beyond, and the things I've learned from visiting with them one-on-one. So use your local mentors. Use, you know, a lot of that can come maybe through the Grazing Lands Coalition or whatever, but they're really a good resource.
Doug Schmidt asks, have any of you tried virtual fencing?
No, but we plan on it as soon as NRCS is going to come out with the cost share. And I don't know what the price on it is right now, but that's probably the only way I'll start to do it is if I get a cost share on it.
Andrew, we've certainly considered it. I think part of the challenge at this stage of the technology, I think they use towers, or at least a couple of the companies require the use of towers, and we're in heavily wooded, steep terrain, so it's somewhat prohibitive for application on the Nebraska Game and Parks Ponderosa acres. But I think, wow, I think it could be a game changer. Like any other new technology, we probably need to get some bugs out of it. But if I talk to some local ranchers that have used it experimentally, it looks quite promising.
Yeah, absolutely. It could be, I agree, a game changer.
Andrew, I have a question on common vetch in pastures. I had a tenant that planted some vetch before I transitioned it to grass, and vetch is pretty hard to get rid of. Any thoughts on that? Is it going to take over forever, or the cows graze it down pretty well?
Can you remind us your location, Dennis?
Southwest Nebraska, south of Ogallala.
Okay. Anybody got some thoughts for Dennis on vetch?
Vance McCoy said, well, it's easy to kill but hard to get rid of, but the cows love it. So I don't know what to expect.
It's kind of the same way with alfalfa. Alfalfa, if you try not to kill it, it's easy to kill, but if you're trying to kill it, it's tough to kill. And some of our old alfalfa fields, when they start getting pretty thin, I will actually plant grass species and make it into a hayfield or irrigated pasture, and it seems to work pretty good. You got to fertilize it, but other than that,
Well, we've got a fairly good level of alfalfa in our mixed species of grass. Always been concerned about bloat issues, but we have had no problems because of the mixture of different species out there. Some say that the alfalfa population will diminish over time, but gee, we've had some significant rains where we had some paddocks that maybe were on a rest period and went to seed, and the rainfall produced volunteer alfalfa coming up. So it's it's interesting. The dry winter we've had may winter kill a lot of it. I don't know.
Well, let us know. Let us know what happens.
Okay.
All right. Well, we're 5 minutes over time. I think I will try to be respectful of everybody's time today and let us get going with our day. But thank you all so much, Chris, Dan, Homer, Ron, and Dennis too. Thanks for getting on here, and everybody who joined to listen to these folks. I think we could have talked for quite a bit longer. It's a big topic to cover. But yeah, check out that website, the Nebraska Conservation Mentorship Network. Great group of people. They're here for their communities, their families. They're here to help you out too. Like, we're all in this together. So with that, thank you all and have a wonderful day.
See you
Thanks,
guys.
Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yes.